Hello everyone, my name is Nougier and I'm here representing the International Drug Policy Consortium. Thanks so much to De Justicia and Alianza Coca para la Paz for inviting me to speak at this event, and my apologies for not being here in person. In this video, I would like to give you an overview of the critical review of the Coca leaf by the World Health Organization's Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, or ECDD. To put things in context, the critical review is coming nearly 75 years after the Coca leaf was included in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. And that basically resulted in a ban in the traditional uses of the plant. And this decision was made despite the fact that coca had been used for millennia by indigenous peoples in the Andean Amazonian region for traditional, religious, ancestral, and medicinal purposes. At the time, the inclusion of the plant in the 1961 treaty was made solely on the basis of colonial and racist arguments. More than 7 decades later, the decision by the ECDD to conduct a critical review of the coca leaf marks a major step towards righting this historical wrong, towards decolonizing international drug policy, and towards better aligning it with human rights, especially the rights of indigenous peoples. The request to conduct a critical review of the coca leaf was initiated in November 2023 by Bolivia, and this request has now been officially supported by Colombia. To kick off the critical review process, the ECDD recruited a number of experts who will be responsible for drafting the critical review report. That report is going to cover a huge range of issues relating to the chemistry, pharmacology, toxicology, therapeutic and traditional use, and epidemiology of the coca leaf. A preliminary discussion on the coca leaf was held at the 47th session of the ECDD, which took place from the 14th to the 18th of October in Geneva. The opening segment of the session was the very first opportunity for civil society, indigenous peoples, academics, and representatives of other UN entities to send written inputs and to make oral statements in relation to the plant. Later on, in June or July 2025, a questionnaire is going to be shared by the World Health Organization to member states to collect relevant information on the coca leaf. All of the information provided to the ECDD via its sessions and the responses to the questionnaire will all be considered during the critical review process. Once the critical review report has been drafted by the experts, it will be shared with relevant stakeholders 1 month before the 48th session of the ECDD. And this will likely take place in October or November 2025. And that will give those stakeholders an additional opportunity to send feedback and more information to the ECDD for it to consider. Finally, the critical review report will be considered at the 48th session of the ECDD, with a second public hearing on the coca leaf during the opening segment of the session, and that will be another opportunity for civil society, academics, indigenous peoples, and other UN entities to provide, again, written and oral contributions to the process. The next step in this process is for the ECDD recommendations to be presented to the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs, so that will very likely happen at its 69th session in March 2026. And there, the 53 members of the Commission will accept or reject the recommendations of the ECDD by a simple majority vote. Once the vote has taken place, the voting decision will be communicated by the UN Secretary General to member states, to the World Health Organization, and to the International Narcotics Control Board, and it will enter into force. However, member states who are dissatisfied with the outcome of the critical review can request the Economic and Social Council to review the voting decision. And in that case, the Economic and Social Council can endorse, reject, or amend the voting decision by a simple majority vote of its members. So now, in terms of participation by civil society and indigenous peoples, there are for now 2 key moments to bear in mind. The first one has passed already. It was the opening segment of the 47th session of the ECDD, during which we could send written inputs and make oral statements to feed into the coca leaf critical review process. If you've missed that moment, don't worry. You will still get another opportunity to do just that again at the 48th session of the ECDD. So at that time, we will likely also have more information about the critical review report. So it will definitely be an important moment for us to mobilize and ensure a strong voice for civil society and especially indigenous peoples. At IDPC, we're hoping that more consultations can be held with indigenous peoples and civil society more broadly between the 47th and 48th session, and that's to ensure that indigenous peoples' knowledge and experiences can truly be reflected in the final report of the ECDD. This, for example, could be done with an additional consultation between the ECDD and indigenous peoples, or extending the request to fill the questionnaire beyond member states so that indigenous peoples and other stakeholders can respond to. But that will be entirely dependent on the ECDD, and we have no more information so far. So finally, I wanted to present what the actual possible outcomes of the critical review could be. The first option is that the ECDD recommends removing the Coca leaf from the schedules of the 1961 Convention altogether. For IDPC, this is of course our preferred option. The second option is a recommendation to transfer the Coca leaf from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 of the 1961 Single Convention. This would mean that the Coca leaf remains classified as a narcotic drug, but will now be subject to less strict administrative controls. The third option is that the ECDD does not recommend any change whatsoever and the Coca leaf remains within Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention. So that's about it in terms of the critical review process. If you would like to learn more about it, IDPC has just produced an advocacy note, which also includes a useful timeline of all the key moments to bear in mind. So feel free to visit our website, idpc.net, for more information, and thank you so much for your attention.